Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our first of 3 webinars surrounding the immediate and essential actions of the Ockenden report. My name is Natalie. I'm a consultant midwife and member of the BICS committee. Just a little bit of housekeeping first. If you could, I think you'll all remain on mute automatically anyway, but just if we ask everyone to stay on mute, we'll hopefully have quite a large attendance this evening. We welcome all your questions and discussion in the chat throughout this evening. Tonight, I'm supported by committee members Louise Page, Philippa Greenfield and Eamon Breslin, who will be keeping an eye on the chat for the question sessions. When we last met as a BICS committee and we talked about hosting these webinars, it was very much from a place of knowing that none of us works in a perfect service. We all have areas we need to improve and incidents we need to learn from. We've already done lots of work in some areas, but not in others. And so the aim of these webinars is to bring us all together across the whole country to meet as colleagues and share what we're all doing in different areas and how we can all take something away from each other. Tonight, we look at monitoring fetal wellbeing and the immediate and essential action to appoint dedicated midwifery and obstetric leads to champion best practice, ensuring that there is practice development, consolidation of existing knowledge and keeping abreast of developments in the field. Fetal monitoring has been and still is a challenge for all of us. Which classification tool to use, how best to teach the skills, how to assess those skills, support and maintain them, and learn effectively when incidents do take place. Working as a team, acknowledging the human factors and the whole clinical picture have also become important parts of the interpretation of fetal wellbeing. Tonight, we've invited colleagues from across England and our home nations to share with us the work they've been doing in establishing these lead clinicians and in the improvement projects related to fetal wellbeing, in line with other national drivers such as the Saving Babies' Lives Care Bundle. In our short time this evening, we've not been able to give space to all our colleagues who are achieving fantastic results from all their work, but I hope we welcome them here in our audience tonight and encourage you all to take part in discussions on the chat and in the question sessions. I am delighted to introduce our first speaker, Sarah Blackwell, fetal monitoring lead midwife from University Hospitals of Leicester, who will share the work she and her colleagues have done in establishing the roles of the lead clinicians. Over to you, Sarah.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here this evening. Now, I've not shared on Zoom, so bear with me a second while I just share my screen. Hoping it works. Is that working?
That's lovely. If you just go to full screen slideshow, that would be perfect. Thank you, Sarah.
Sorry. Oh,
yep, that one on the right. Keep going. Perfect.
That one. No, it's not doing anything.
Yeah, if you just click OK on that message there, it should be fine.
What? Just close that box. Sorry.
Just click OK on that box.
I've not got an OK. Sorry, I knew this would happen. I'd just like to make sure everyone can see me, but I can't see an OK box.
Okay, so just close the, can you see the pop-up box about your graphics?
I've only got who can share, that's all I've got.
Okay, if you stop sharing, I've got your slides, I'll share them for you.
Thank you, so sorry. Oh, hang on.
Not at all.
Has that worked? Ah, did that work?
Yes, that's it. Perfect.
Ah, lovely. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name's Sarah Blackwell and I'm the fetal monitoring lead at University Hospitals of Leicester. And thanks for the invite. And I've just come here just to kind of give you an introduction to the role of the fetal monitoring midwife and give you a snapshot of what the last 14 months has looked like for me within this role. If it works. Okay, so I'm the fetal monitoring midwife lead here. I work for 30 hours over 2 sites with oversight of a standalone birth centre and a home birth team. We do around 9,700 deliveries a year, and that means that we employ around 450 midwives and 120 medical staff. So we're quite a big unit when it comes to deliveries and things like that. Before I came into post, our fetal monitoring training looked a little bit like this. We did around 4 hours of fetal monitoring training as part of our obstetric disciplinary training day. And just as I was coming into post, the education team was starting to introduce that as a half-day training. So that's basically what our fetal monitoring looked like 14 months ago, and that was once a year for all staff. We haven't had K2 at University Hospitals of Leicester for quite a while. So when I came into post, we were very determined to try and develop this role. And so it helped us to do a full day's fetal monitoring training with an assessment at the end of that. That's an MDT approach. We also have implemented intermittent auscultation, intelligent intermittent auscultation training through the eLearning for Health website. You'll hear about that later, I know. I started weekly CTG seminars, helped update the fetal monitoring guidelines, support staff where learning was identified, to be visible, to be able to consolidate knowledge and people be able to approach me, to be involved with PRG and RCA reports, and to network both regionally and nationally. And that's how I saw the vision of the fetal monitoring role when I came into post. And by having those dedicated hours, it allowed me to work towards this. UHL started the journey of excellence in 2019 when we were lucky enough to be part of the MapNeo SIP programme and Wave 3. This allowed us to look at a project to reduce our HIE rates. So historically, we at UHL did have a high incidence of HIE cases. And so we were determined by this project to reduce this by 30%. We had lots of things and we looked at lots of different things, but we decided that just concentrating on CTG recognition and that squiggly line in the room and listening to that fetal heart wasn't enough, and we need to start to look at the bigger picture. And this is what helped with our significant reduction. So as you can see from this slide here, we started with the main focus around fresh eyes. One that we didn't historically do great at University Hospitals of Leicester, but we were getting better at, but we felt that we needed to focus around that recognition first. So we did quite a few QI projects and lots of test of change, which was really new to us. And we identified where we were failing. And as a result of that, we actually introduced set times for our fresh eyes so that everybody knew when everybody's fresh eyes was due. And it wasn't just if women came in an hour before they got a fresh eyes, or if they came in 20 minutes before they got a fresh eyes, in order to get them on that thing. So we started off with handover and then every 2 hours so that it coincided with ward rounds and break changeover. So we always had that fresh eyes approach, and I'll show you how that improved as a result shortly. We also looked at having introducing an ongoing risk assessment. I know this is quite hot at the minute, but we've been doing this for about a year at University Hospitals of Leicester, where it looks at highlighting pre-existing, the current changes, current risk factors on admission, and also how often they change. So we review this every 2 hours. It gives us a score, and that's just to mainly highlight to that midwife or the obstetrician that their risk factors are changing. And this is done in all settings. So this is done within our standalone birth centres, our home births, and in hospital. With the help of the team, we introduced some safety huddles. They start there 4 times a day, if or more if needed, so that we can get that helicopter view of all ladies and put plans into place if we need to. So this is done first thing in the morning, a re-huddle around lunchtime, again at changeover between 8 and then again in the night or before if we need them. And lots of people take part in those, including the anaesthetist, the obstetrician on their hot weeks, the coordinator, the bleep holder, and the ward staff, so that everybody knows what's happening in every area and if there is any things that need to come from the ward or maternity assessment centre. We also then looked at the physiology of fetal heart rate monitoring and changed our guidelines in order to incorporate parts of this. That was mainly so that the staff understood what was happening to the fetal heart and the bigger picture, and finding out whether that baby was fit for labour or not. And a result of all these things together, we managed to reduce our HIE rates by 34% in that year. So this is just some graphs as to what it looks like and when our HIE rates for 2 and 3 at the beginning of the project, when we introduced the set times, when we introduced the new guidelines, and then when I came into post. So as you can see from the bottom two graphs, that's our reduction in our HIE cases. The green is the babies that then still had an abnormal scan after being cooled. So as you can see, that improved. And also our meconium aspirations have been improved as a result of all of this. So these are the babies admitted with meconium aspiration. These are just a bit of an idea as to what that actually looks like in statistics and data. So just to let you know that it didn't really change our emergency section rate. So this is, it stayed fairly stable. Obviously we had a little bit of a spike there in July and August, but it stayed fairly stable throughout this process. It helped reduce our babies being born with poor cord gases and keep those a lot more stable than what they were. It helped reduce, I know we don't really focus on HIE1 when it comes to risk factors, but actually we had a massive impact on our HIE1 rates as well. This was our fresh eye compliance. As I said previously, it was around 30% when we started the project back in 2019, and that's now currently standing at between 90 and 100% compliance for our fresh eyes. And we also, with the intrapartum risk assessment, that started off about 65%. And as you can see, as we introduced that, that improved drastically in around June last year. 4 months into my new job role, COVID hit, as it has massive effect on everybody. So we had to be a little bit more imaginative as to how we worked things. And that included how many people were in rooms with COVID positive women. So we had to look outside that box a little bit. So we introduced using FaceTime to review CTGs, so that only people needed to go in the room when it was needed, to help reduce safety for the staff as well as the women. So that you can see there's a coordinator looking at reviewing the CTG via FaceTime on the ward round. We also had to go virtual. We wanted to keep going with our fetal monitoring training. We actually only stopped our fetal monitoring training for 2 months during the pandemic, and then we went virtually online, and we used Microsoft Forms to help do our assessments, so that we still had people sitting their assessments on the day to be able to find out whether our teaching had helped or not. We also introduced just some small T-trolley training, so very small groups of people in the ward round, in order just to give those snapshots of small learning if we had any. And as I'll come on to in a second, we went on to Microsoft Teams, which was an amazing thing. Never done anything like it before, but actually the power of Teams has allowed us to network and allowed us to get to where we are today. And the picture at the bottom there is just one of our fetal monitoring network meetings, a screenshot of that. I never thought we'd ever get that far, but we never would have been able to do what we do today if it wasn't for Teams. So when I was part of the MAT-NEO project, the idea of sharing ideas, good practice and collaborative working really impacted on me and how I felt we needed to move forward. So as a result, and with the help of the Consultant Midwife Network, I started to set up a fetal monitoring lead network. And as you can see from the map, this is just what it looks like currently. There is probably a couple more dots to add to there in the last few days since I did this presentation, but COVID has actually allowed me to set this up, because there's no way we ever would have been able to meet as we do now. Originally, it started in August 2020 with 6 midwives just sharing what the role meant to them and how they wanted to move it forward. And in June this year, it currently stands at 132 units. This includes now consultant leads as off the back of the Ockenden recommendations. And this network was mainly used to set up shared learning, improve collaborative working, discuss learning outcomes and share ideas. We currently meet monthly, so people attend if they can, and we're starting to work towards more of a national voice now. I actually didn't realise it had become a national thing until I went on the Each Baby Counts conference, where it was referred to as the national network, and I actually text someone going, does that mean mine? I was quite unsure about that. So it's been a lot of hard work, but a brilliant thing to have done. If you click on each one of these leads, you'll get the if you click on each one of these pointers, you'll also see the midwife and the lead consultant, if they have one's email, so people can network individually as well as collectively. And as you can see from the spread of all those colours, although it is predominantly red for NICE, you can see that that's changing towards more of a physiological approach. The yellow and the blue are those units currently transitioning. The black dots are people that have just joined recently, and they've not quite told me what classification tools they are. So we go right from Cornwall right up to Scotland with that currently. And if anyone wants to join, if they just let me know, that's fine. Off the back of this, and with the help of NHSI and the MatNeo SIP people, I was able to apply for an NHS Futures platform to allow us to do this more effectively than the amount of emails that we were getting through every day, and trying to keep an eye on that, as well as the fetal monitoring role. So this was launched in May, so it's still quite new. And that's enabled to share, keep abreast of developments and introduce best practice. Again, one of the Ockenden report recommendations, and it includes forums, shared guidelines, recordings of all the meetings, and much more. So all fetal monitoring leads are welcome to join this. Recently, I had the pleasure, and I know she's listening because she's texted me, of working with Catherine Hockley of Mid Yorkshire Hospitals to develop Monitoring May. This was a month-long learning event that we put on, that started out with a real simple tweet by Catherine on Twitter, talking about Monitoring May and how they were going to just highlight their new guidelines, that then ended up becoming what you can see before you, with all these agencies getting involved. And that was recorded with the help of the East Midlands Academic Science Network and the help of Eileen and gang to get that up and running. So we had weekly topics, every week had a different focus, all around the Ockenden recommendations around human factors and risk assessments. As you can see, we had Saving Babies' Lives, Each Baby Counts, Baby Lifeline, HSIB, the Oxford Academic Health Science Network, and many more all came along to help us celebrate. This was offered for free to all members, and it went wider, so it didn't just have to be members of the Fetal Monitoring Network. And those recordings are hopefully going to be out by the beginning of July, is what we're hoping. And we're just waiting for everything to be uploaded, because they're quite long videos. During that week, we concentrated on the first week on monitoring of low risk labour, so intelligent intermittent auscultation, and that was to coincide with International Day of the Midwife. The second week we concentrated on the antenatal CTG and situational awareness, where Professor Redmond joined us. The third week was around intrapartum CTGs and human factors, and we had lots of people talking about that. And the fourth week was HIE recognition and escalation and deterioration, where we were really fortunate to have 2 service users share their stories of what it was like to have a baby with HIE as a result of that. And we're forever grateful for those people that gave up their time in order to help us. We also had a little bit of a launch of the joint work between the RCOG prompt and the RCM with regards to the new guidelines that they're looking at. The feedback from this was so positive, it was unbelievable. 98% wanted to see this return next year, so I think we've got some work ahead of us. 98% said it was relevant to practice, and 79% that they would change their practice as a result of what they'd seen during this month. So it was an amazing thing that we turned around within a month. I'm not quite sure how we did it, but we managed it. So for those that attended, I hope you all enjoyed it. Finally, I just kind of wanted to go through again what the role of the fetal monitoring midwife looks like at University Hospitals of Leicester, and probably within your own units. So as you can see from the slides that I've showed you, we'd already implemented quite a lot of the changes that Ockenden had recommended with regards to fetal monitoring, but these actions actually strengthened our points and the way that we were moving forward. They're the things that I introduced within that first few months to be able to help things, and these are just some more additions to that. We now have got a regionally agreed pass, mark and fail pathways that's within the Midlands region as part of that network that I'm part of. We're able to do virtual case presentations that are MDT, where we shared learning, not just from adverse outcomes, but also good outcomes and where care was good. It's allowed me to help write my first lot of guidelines ever. So they're now 3 separate guidelines with some flow charts in there. We now have an antenatal guideline, an intermittent intermittent auscultation guideline and an intrapartum guideline to help the staff access the information that they need quickly and easily, and make it very clear as to actions and where we move forward. If people don't quite pass that fetal monitoring assessment, or they need more support, then I'm there to do one-to-one sessions, and I'm visible on Delivery Suite cross-site 2 days a week in order to help do that. And it's been great, because actually people have come to me and said, I've got a really interesting CTG, I'd love to talk about it with you. And it's made a real difference to, hopefully, to people's confidence to escalate and people's confidence in their understanding of fetal monitoring. I've helped implement all the recommendations of saving babies' lives. By involving myself in the RCAs and the PRG meetings, it's allowed us to look at that bigger picture and not just that CTG. It's allowed us to look at the risk factors, the human factors, and gain knowledge from that and share that learning. Nationally, regionally and nationally, obviously, I've done the network. That's allowed us to share that best practice. The consultant leads are now included, and we're now working towards a more of a national voice. Again, the full day fetal monitoring, which I really hope is going to go face to face again in the next few months, because there's nothing worse than looking at a blank screen and not getting a lot of feedback until it comes to those case studies and those people that you know you can pick on that will talk to you during a Teams event. And I'm sure we all know who they are. Just wanted to end really by saying that we are actually the change. In order to improve outcomes for mothers and babies and families, we need to be that change. We need to understand the bigger picture, and we need to work towards that. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, and to everyone at UHL that's helped me on this journey. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Such fantastic work, and thank you for sharing it all with us tonight. We've got some questions that have come up in the chat, if that's okay.
No
we've got about 5 minutes. The first from Sam. She wanted to know, was the full study day funded within training budget for the staff, or did you have to put a business case together?
No, it's funded as part of our training. We have 3 days. We have a fetal monitoring study day, a saving babies' lives study day, and an essential to job role training. So it's split between the 3 days. So it's part of our mandatory training.
Thank you. And then from Claire, with the second stage being the most dangerous time for the baby, did the instrumental birth rate change?
That's one thing that I haven't looked at the data. I have turned into a bit of a data geek, but actually that's a really good point, and I'd love to look at that. So yeah, I'm going to go back and look at that now. We do now do fresh eyes within second stage. So we do fresh eyes in every half an hour now as the result of some outcomes where we've realised that we've lost that situational awareness a little bit. And so now the midwives buzz after half an hour or before if needed to get a fresh eyes in second stage. So, but yeah, I will look at that. That's quite an interesting one. Thank you for that. And you've got me some work to do.
Always. Thank you. How was competency assessment with a pass-fail component received by the teams across your region?
Across the region, it's been very different. From an East Midlands point of view, we were all 7, I think there were 7 units out of the 8 that had agreed that we would have the same test paper and the same pass marks, so that when the doctors moved around from hospital to hospital within that region, that they would all be able to then take that training with them, and everyone would know that they'd had that assessment and not necessarily need to take it within that time. Since we've joined as a bigger Midlands, that's a lot difficult because everyone uses a different CTG classification, and actually next week it's gone out for final consultation with the package, the training package that's been put together. So I think that's watch this space. I'm hoping that people have took it on board, but it's basically, it's there if you want it, you don't have to use it, but actually it helps to standardize things a little bit more, if that answers your question.
Thank you. Have you got much from Scotland joining in with the network, and like Northern Ireland and Wales?
So Northern Ireland, yeah, I've got a few in Northern Ireland that have got on board. Scotland, I haven't really managed to break. I think we've got 1 person up in Scotland. So yeah, please get in touch if anybody wants to join us from Scotland. I know things are very different with the health service up there. So I know that they find, and Southern Ireland find it sometimes quite difficult to be on the understand where our obstacles are sometimes. But yeah, Wales, we've linked with not a lot in North Wales, so yeah, anyone in North Wales who want to get in touch. But yeah, we are daily, we have somebody wanting to join. It keeps me on my toes, that's for sure.
Thank you so much, Sarah. There are a few more questions, and if you have a chance, Sarah, you might be able to answer a few of them in the chat.
Yeah, I'll have a go.
The rest of the evening. And if you've got any time left at the end, we'll come back to some of them as well. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I'm just going to move us on to our next presentation. Thank you so much, Sarah. Please welcome Dudu Nayathi, fetal monitoring and surveillance midwife, and Louisa Davidson, consultant midwife from Birmingham Women's and Children's, who will take us through their QI project to reduce the number of term admissions to the neonatal unit from intrapartum areas where fetal monitoring was a contributory factor by 25% by 2022. Take it away, Dudu.
Oh. Okay, just going to share my screen for now. Can you all see that?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll hand over to Louisa. She will do the background and then I'll take over from here. Over to you, Louisa.
Thanks, Dudu. Just move it to the next slide, please. So I'm basically just here just to really, the cameo act really ahead of Dudu, because she's really the shining star that's done all of this work. So before we employed Dudu at Birmingham Women's, we were providing around 2 to 2.5 hours of fetal surveillance training a year as part of our prompt mandatory training. And there wasn't really a lot else. We had quite a depleted education team at the time. And what we were noticing was that we were having quite regular incidents where fetal monitoring, be that either CTG, interpretation, management, or performance of IA or escalation of anything to do with fetal monitoring, were contributory factors to babies going to the neonatal unit. That may be babies who unfortunately had HIE, or those that went for respiratory admission. So just before COVID hit, Dudu was recruited and started. So actually when she first started, she spent the first couple of months doing donning and doffing education rather than fetal surveillance education. So as we all know, it's been very difficult through COVID to keep some of this stuff going. So it's amazing what she's achieved. So I'll hand over to Dudu now, who will talk to you about her QI project and the outcomes that she's had.
Okay, so to try and improve the outcomes and move from the situation that Birmingham Women's was in, we started the Acute Quality Improvement Project, and I'll talk you through this driver diagram. So we had the aim to reduce a number of term neonatal admissions from intrapartum areas where fetal monitoring was a contributory factor by at least 25% by 2022. So our intrapartum areas, we were referring to delivery suite and the birth center. So all fetal monitoring in terms of IA and CTG interpretation. So I was at the forefront of this project, and the main focus on here was to revamp the education. So previously, as Louisa had already said, it was about 2.5 to 3 hours at the most as part of prompt, and that's all CTG training was about. There was some MDT meetings which were poorly attended at the time. So with the education then, we decided to go on to a full day of training, 1 day. So what we do is we follow NICE guidance, but we teach physiology with the goal of helping staff to individualize the care of these babies. So not only do we teach physiology, we also look at things like human factors, because that has come up as a recurring theme on all these cases that we have focused on. And we also have a one-day full training for the human factors as well to go alongside it. So with the one-day fetal monitoring training, we also have sessions like complex situations and the C2G. We don't only focus on the intrapartum, we also focus on antenatal C2G, we also focus on the intermittent auscultation. It's quite an interactive day, and that's been well evaluated. We've got games as well, like I'm a hypoxic baby, get me out of here. And with those games, we help to, it just helps staff understand the different types of hypoxia in a better context and then apply it in terms of interpreting the CTGs. Another thing that we did was to try and improve the compliance of fresh eyes. As we go through the slides, I'll show you what the compliance looks like. But I have been more visible clinically in terms of promoting fresh eyes as well. Another thing that we've done as well is the equipment, more of an upgrade. So in some of the cases that we reviewed, you will find that loss of contact, especially where there was raised BMI patients, there was inadequate monitoring. So we've now purchased telemetry machines from Philips, and they have got a raised BMI pod just for adequate monitoring for raised BMI patients, and the contact is much more better then. Our guidelines as well, we still ensure that they're evidence-based and still up-to-date, clear and concise. So how do we keep all this in track? We carry on with the audit. So what we really look at is the number of babies being admitted to the neonatal unit, where CTG has been, or IA has been a contributory factor. We also look at the babies born with ABGAs less than 7 at 5 minutes, where fetal monitoring again has been a contributory factor. We also look at compliance to fresh eyes. So with the training, we had a proper database with accurate figures as of November 2020. And as you all know, the challenges we faced through COVID, but we did try our best. It was well below the 90% that was recommended at the time. But as you can see, there's an upward trend and how the compliance has improved. So Q1 in 2020-2021, that was January, February, March 2020. You can see that most fresh eyes were not done on an hourly basis. The audit revealed that if fresh eyes were done, it was usually at 3 hourly or more intervals. So having done that project and making sure we raise awareness, on the next audit, which was in Q2, it moved up to 50%, and then Q3 up to 75%. Now we're in 80%, and we're in the process of auditing again, just to make sure we don't lose sight of what's happening. And as you can see as well, with that slide, it tells us the number of babies that had HIE, where fetal monitoring has been a contributory factor. We also looked at the active cooling babies and also babies with ABGAs less than 7 at 5 minutes in conjunction with the admissions to neonatal unit. And as you can see, from Q3 2019 to 2020, the numbers were really high. And as the training improved, you can see there's a downward trend. And now we are close to almost none. Don't think we can get to 0, but it's just human we can try. So we are still facing some challenges, but we are working towards it. So with the weekly CTG meetings, we do them twice weekly on a Monday and then a Thursday. So really well attended by the doctors. We rarely have midwives due to the fact that it's a really busy unit. And sometimes it's difficult to get a free midwife, but if we do, then not that many, but the whole point is to have multidisciplinary training. So we do try, and the next thing what we're going to do is try and do them virtually as well, so that all those that are off are able to join through. We're still having trouble in terms of fresh eyes compliance. We're not up to where we should be really, but again, it's to do with staffing a lot of other factors, and we are putting things in place of that. Just because we've recently changed again in terms of equipment, but it's nothing that training cannot fix. In terms of linking CTGs, we use BadgerNet. So sometimes we will have issues where CTG records are not actually linking onto BadgerNet, but we always have a paper copy printed just for backup. And another thing, we're encouraging the consideration of the whole clinical picture. So for example, in terms of sepsis, because that has been the most recent thing in the admissions to neonatal unit. So the next steps, like I've said, the weekly CTG meetings, we're going to start to do them on Zoom and record them. We'll also increase the vlogs, which is our video logs, to extend learning wider. We will also continue to audit and action. And then consideration of human factors during handover time is often a common trend in the cases that we've recently reviewed. So not only are we talking about or teaching the human factors during the CTG training for the whole day, but there's also a full day of human factors now, and we're hoping that this will improve the outcomes as well. So we're also going to be looking at new quality improvement projects related to preterm and antenatal fetal monitoring. So in conclusion, really, it's just to say that our changes to fetal monitoring teaching in combination with the regular multidisciplinary case reviews and discussion has improved staff engagement and reduced incidents of avoidable harm. So change is possible wherever you are. When everything feels like an uphill struggle, just think of the view from the top. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dudu. Fantastic work and results. A couple of questions. Somebody just checking, could you clarify, is that you've had only one neonatal unit admission and no HIE in that last quarter that you were in your results?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again?
Yeah, I think when you were going through all that downward trend of your results, is it right that it's coming down to recently, like you've only had one neonatal unit admission and no HIE?
Okay, yes, so we've only had one neonatal unit admission where CTG has been a contributory factor.
See.
Yes, and
thank you for
any HSID cases as of October last year.
Thank you for clarifying. Do you have an obstetric lead? And if you do, how much do they support in terms of hours and training?
So at the moment, we have not got one that's already appointed, but I'm working alongside a consultant obstetrician. So they're coming to facilitate the twice weekly MDT meetings every Monday and every Thursday.
Thank you. And do the midwives get allocated any time to attend the CTG meetings?
They don't get allocated any time, and I think that is where the problem is. Otherwise, if they had time allocated, would find that the attendance would improve quite a lot. So perhaps that's something we should be looking forward to.
Thank you so much, Dudi. That was a really great presentation and amazing work. We're continuing to get questions and discussion in the chat. And if you're able to keep an eye on that and contribute on there, that would be also amazing. But thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm just going to move us on to our next speakers. A very big thank you to Susie Crow, an obstetrician, and Kathy Winter, a midwife, who have both been working on the intrapartum fetal surveillance task and finish group, who are presenting an update on intrapartum surveillance. Susie is also the Labour Ward Lead representative for the BICS committee. Over to you guys, thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Over to you, Kathy.
Lovely. Oh yes, the technology is amazing, isn't it? Is that our first slide? That must be Susie. Yeah, perfect. So Susie and I are doing a double act. I'm going to do a bit of a Chris Whitty and have to ask Susie to move on to the next slide each time because Susie's controlling it. But thank you for asking us to talk. We're just going to give you a bit of an update on the sort of task and finish group that's hopefully turning into a sort of a national program that everybody's going to be able to contribute to. I'm just going to do a bit of a background. Susie's going to talk about, what the program is involved so far, and then we'll have a bit of a summary and next steps at the end. So essentially, just to set the scene, I guess, traditionally we continually talk about intrapartum fetal monitoring, and we've just had some fantastic talks sharing how they're approaching ways of improving the training in the units, etc., from Sarah and Dudu. I guess what we're saying is that, certainly needs to be a recognition, just as you've all said, that intrapartum fetal surveillance is more than just focusing on that fetal heart rate, because I think traditionally that's something we've done. We risk assess when women start in labour. We offer a method of monitoring, and then that sort of fetal monitoring and the monitoring of the fetal heart rate becomes our focus really for the whole time of labour, and perhaps the other risks seem to sort of go into the periphery a bit. But if you're thinking about intrapartum fetal surveillance, obviously you've got mothers and babies who are different and they approach labour in many different ways. You've got different forms of fetal monitoring that you're going to offer women, and we know that depends upon that risk assessment. We've got a variation in the guidelines that are used, and Susie will talk about the scoping that we did, and you can see from Sarah's slides previously as well about the variation in the guidelines that are being used in the units in the UK. And then we want to include some shared decision making with women and their families. Is it possible that, as we progress in this sort of personalised care through labour, can we include the women and their family in that decision making? And then very importantly, we need to make sure there's systems for action and escalation, and the human factors that's all around that as well. Can you escalate easily? Is there a system? And so all of that has got to be included in our system of care. Can you do the next slide, Susie? Thank you. So we have an opportunity essentially to look at, the main problem, which is why is intrapartum fetal monitoring so difficult? We've been working closely with this institute. They are sort of specialist sort of improvement scientists, as you might say, that are based in Cambridge. And they have got a discovery platform that I'll talk about a little bit more, but it's a fantastic way of actually gaining more rapid and diverse consultation from staff and women. So that's our opportunity, is with this sort of development of a national programme, we've got a way that we can actually include all voices, so that hopefully we're going to come up with something that's got a consensus feel behind it. And the idea is that, we'll be able to produce some tools and a training programme that's a national programme that can be used in all units. And another part of it is impacted fetal head, but I'm concentrating on intrapartum fetal surveillance with the fetal monitoring today. And I think the great thing about doing the monitoring May talk with Sarah and Catherine was a fantastic thing. But one thing we came away with was the fact that there did seem to be a wealth of positivity about having a national programme that maybe gave some consistency throughout the country. Next slide, Susie. And just talking a little bit about this institute, that if you go on their website, they're actually running one of the studies at the moment is called the IMO Study, which is improving electronic fetal heart rate monitoring. And the key thing about this study is that there's several phases to it, but the first phase is doing a systematic review of actually training that's undergone in the UK and whether that training in fetal monitoring has been effective, and that's already been published. And their next steps are actually observing units And the key thing about the observation is that they were observing midwives and obstetricians in 3 maternity units across the UK, just to get an idea of the routine working practices. And then based on that, they will come up with some ideas of this whole system approach, because it's very complex. And if you look at that yellow little graph there, this is just their initial findings. They haven't published it yet, but their initial findings definitely show that with the observations they've done, it's very complex. You know, you've got equipment issues, you've got workload and staffing, you've got clearly escalation mechanisms that are varying, different training in units, about human factors and hierarchy, team working and communication. So you can see there's a whole gambit of factors that perhaps influence how effective we are. Next slide. So back in 2019, it was the RCOG and the RCM decided that could we tackle this problem? Clearly we weren't, we were still having perhaps avoidable deaths, sadly, and avoidable outcomes from areas of intrapartum fetal surveillance. And so decided that this needed a collaborative approach to see if we could come up with some solutions that then could be absolutely taken on nationally. So back in 2019, it was chaired by the presidents that were then, which was Leslie Reagan and Jill Wharton, and since taken over by Eddie Morris. And so you had all sorts of representatives on the group, a very large group, clinical leads and trainees, midwives and obstetricians that are, you know, working in units across the country, all sorts of experts, and there's many experts out there, you know, that we want to pull on their expertise without a doubt. Education leads for, you know, e-learning for health, etc. This institute, the improvement science arm for that. And the key thing with this institute being involved is it provides, you know, some independence to this. So we've got our clinical groups collaborating together, but we've also got academic independence as well, which gives it a robustness. And then of course we've got the women's voices, and very well representative on the group. Okay, I think, have I got one more slide? I think so, Susie. So essentially the aims of the group, 3 main aims. First aim was to gain multi-professional consensus on intrapartum fetal surveillance risk assessment concept. And I think Susie's going to share with you what that concept would be, what we're suggesting. And the key thing there really is that multidisciplinary consensus, that we can actually get wide consensus on this. And then we'll aim to develop tools that will facilitate the early detection, those accumulating risks that impact on the fetus over time, with the aim that we're going to be intervening before we get to the stage where we've you know, maybe left it too late. And then our aim, of course, is based on all of the feedback and the tools that are developed, there'll be a national rollout of these tools, providing the tools to do the training locally as well. So hopefully making it easy for you to take this on in your units as well. Okay, I think it's over to Susie for a few slides and then back again later.
Thanks, Kathy. So back in 2020, March 2020, when the world was a very, very different place indeed, just before the pandemic really hit, we held a big stakeholders workshop. So we had over 100 delegates at the RCOG, and there were key policymakers, stakeholders, but crucially we had shop floor midwives, shop floor obstetricians, trainees, to really look at what we needed to do to work up both testing the concept that we had developed, but also looking at things like what escalation looked like, what learning looked like, what involving women looked like. But this was the key concept that we had developed, and that was that during labour there may be a gradual and progressive deterioration in the fetal condition over time, and that this may occur when there are identified risk factors at the onset of labour, but crucially, this may also develop in babies that have been assessed to be at low risk for intrapartum hypoxia at the beginning of labour. So this really important recognition that actually some babies that end up brain damaged or sadly stillborn at the end of labours are actually the babies that we've assessed as being low risk. And sometimes the babies that we've assessed as being high risk at the start of labours actually do quite well, because we've already got all of these plans and have really alerted to everybody, all the staff members, to the fact that this is an at-risk baby. There's also the idea that there's an accumulation of risks over time, but that actually what we often look at the moment in terms of triggering action is a change in the fetal heart rate, or CTG, as defined by any of the fetal monitoring guidelines currently in use. So really thinking about the fact that we argue, and as obstetricians and midwives, we can argue the toss so much over whether or not this CG is suspicious or pathological. Normally we say it's fine if it's normal, but actually suspicious, pathological, we'll all be arguing the toss. But actually the question is, should we be thinking about the underlying reasons behind those changes and what's going on with that actual baby? And actually, should we be thinking about the overall context of that baby? So whether or not there are other risk factors in terms of whether or not we should be thinking about delivery, as opposed to my only threshold for delivery is when the CTG is pathological. Because sometimes for some babies, these babies may have irreversible brain injuries. And that's one of the crucial things. So part of it is about capturing those at-risk babies who've developed risk factors through the course of their labour. And that was the concept that we tested. And we had wide-scale buy-in to this concept and an acknowledgement that actually this would help to prevent some of the huge variation we have around the country. We also did a scoping exercise. I think Sarah's obviously just done it as well as absolutely brilliantly. I thought your talk was amazing, by the way, Sarah. And just looking at the guideline use in the UK, because one of the things we initially looked at was whether or not we could just be recommending the adoption of one guideline across the UK, because one of the big problems is that we have huge variation. But actually, when we looked at it, you've seen the map that Sarah's produced. We have lots of different guidelines in place. Well, we have 3 different guidelines, but lots of variation around the country. So it's not, you can see that there are some regions that have all adopted one guideline, but many regions have adopted a variety of guidelines. Some use a combination of guidelines. When we did the scoping exercise, people were very, very wedded to their guidelines, particularly when they had introduced a big teaching and training package associated with that guideline that may have impacted on care. But one of the big problems that we've got is that this variation causes uncertainty, particularly for shop floor midwives and trainees, particularly when we're using different nomenclature. So you might go from one unit to the next within a small region, and they may even describe, for example, decelerations differently. So you're having different nomenclature, but also crucially different thresholds for intervention. And actually what we really need as a country is to develop some form of standardization on this. So how do we personalise care in labour? So the first thing is what should be included in an intrapartum personalised risk assessment. So obviously we all need to consider the presence of antenatal risk factors, that particularly the ones that indicate placental dysfunction, because we know those are the at-risk babies, so preeclampsia, IUGR, reduced fetal movements, or maternal medical conditions. But often we list these without really, really considering what they actually mean. So we're often really good at listing them, and they might often go in the same line as epidural, and actually without really thinking about the fact that actually this risk factor is a really important risk factor, because this is very at-risk baby because it's IUGR, and we're lumping it along with having epidural as well. And there often are only risk assessment, and I know that increasingly we're all starting to introduce different forms of risk assessments, particularly post-Ockenden, but actually we don't have a standardised national way of risk assessing continually through labour. And we're often failing to pick up accumulating or changing risk factors over time, particularly for the low-risk baby. And then often what we do is we focus on the fetal heart rate itself and use that as our main decision-making tool, rather than really considering the context and the potential reasons behind the change in the fetal heart rate for that baby. So actually, why has this baby started developing decelerations? Is it because it's a small baby that's actually not coping with the labour? Or actually, is it to do with the fact that the woman's just been lying on her back and we just need to change position, as an example? So we really need to be thinking about the context and the development of new intrapartum risk factors. So in addition to the fetal heart rate changes, we really need to be asking, is the progress in labour okay? And crucially, have we added in syntocinon? And have there been any new intrapartum risk factors? And what are the intrapartum risk factors that really make a difference to babies? And they particularly include things like maternal temperature and meconium that I'll go on to in a minute. And then, of course, we need to consider the fetal heart rate, either intermittent auscultation or changes in the classification of the CTG, and looking why there's a change. So this baby is changing. Why are we picking up a change in this baby over time? And then pulling that all together in terms of contextualizing risk, sharing decision-making with the woman and her family, and then really saying, is the baby okay, rather than, is the CTG okay? So this was Asma Khalil's paper from 2015, and this looked at important predictors of poor outcomes, and there were 4 main antenatal and intrapartum risk factors that really predicted fetal compromise and NICU admission. So the first, as I've described already, is intrauterine growth restriction, which has a significant impact. But crucially, these are all risk factors that can develop even with low-risk labours and low-risk babies, so significant meconium stain liquor, intrapartum maternal pyrexia, slow progress in oxytocin use, and they significantly predict fetal compromise and NICU admission. And these are the really important risk factors we need to be capturing when we're thinking about contextualisation. So in terms of risk assessment tools that we've been developing and will continue to develop, we've been trying to design tools that will combine context with fetal heart rate monitoring for all women in labour. So that includes an assessment tool at the onset of labour, then hourly assessments using separate tools for IA or CTGs to identify the development of intrapartum risks, and in particular meconium, pyrexia and use of syntocinon. These are tools that need to be easy to use. We don't need to add any more complexity to an already complex environment, so we need to think about it from a human factors perspective. Tools that can be completed along with the partogram, that are easy to use, that help us really identify those risk factors and provide an hourly summary of antenatal risk factors, progress in labour, the development of more risks, and any changes in the fetal heart rate. And then crucially, what we then need is a really good trigger system, because actually what we see a lot is that people recognise there's a problem, but then things fall down with escalation. So what can we do to standardise escalation? What can we do to standardise action so that we don't have different thresholds for intervention in one unit to the other because we use different CTGs, but actually so that we have the same threshold for every woman and every baby in the country? And that really is the goal with this project. So the trigger system would require consideration of, for example, progress in labour. So is the progress normal, or is there a delay as per NICE? Has there been the development of intrapartum risk factors that we've already discussed? Are the changes in the fetal heart rate or the changes in the CTG classification, is the CTG normal or is it not normal? Because even not normal may sometimes indicate a significant change for an at-risk baby in the context and presence of other risk factors. And really what we want to make it clear is that we're recommending or permitting escalation and action. So for that shop floor midwife and that shop floor ST3 at 3 o'clock in the morning, we make it very easy for them to make the right decision and make the right way the easy way, and considering that from a human factors approach. Back to you, Kathy.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Susie. Yeah, so just a couple of slides on, how we're going to move forward with this, really. So our aim is that we're going to develop the clinical tools, and the idea of the tools being obviously that it will provide that personalised care for women, so we're individually deciding what's the best for that woman and her baby, and then we'll build a community of practice. So essentially, I've talked about this institute. They have a digital platform, and they're already asking for expressions of interest. So I'll give you that the link at the end, because I think the key thing is that if we can all be involved, express our interest to be involved, and then as soon as the platform is ready and we can start the consultation and the consensus building about how we're going to get the best risk assessment tools we can, we can all join in with that, which I think is a great thing. And as I say, including women and their families as well. I guess the idea being that once we get to developing the tools and rolling them out, we'll already have everybody on board, because everybody will know they've had a voice in it. That's our aim. Next slide, Susie. Yeah, and when we say the national programme, we have actually now secured, and I say we, that's the RCM and the RCOG, have secured some funding from the Department of Health, which is a great thing, because it definitely needs some funding for us to be able to do this all together. And so it'll be led by the RCM and the RCOG, with this institute providing the platform, etc. There'll also be some funded posts coming up to help move this work forward. So keep your eyes open, because the RCOG and the RCM will be putting out the adverts, and that'll be for midwives and obstetricians to support the project going forward. We'll obviously be having a large parent voices contingent as well. And then in the next phase, once we've done the consultation and the consensus, we'll want some pathfinder units. So again, that expression of interest that you're expressing now, you know, we'll need some pathfinder units to test these tools out initially before we can go to a wider network approach on it. Okay, next slide, Susie. So thinking of the discovery expression of interest, if you make a note of this link, you can see there, I think this is recorded, so you're going to be able to return to it anyway, but essentially, even if you just went on to discovery and is the baby okay, is the key word to put in there, and then you can give your details. And once the platform is ready to go, because at the moment they're building the platform, and the platform will be a combination of sort of questionnaires. There will be a chance for people to join focus groups as well, but also there'll be animated videos for us to comment on the communication, etc. So really important that we get as many people involved and consulting as possible on this. So do take a note of that email address and join, you know, let us know that you're interested to be involved. I think the last slide just says thank you, doesn't it? It does. There you go. So I hope we shared, you know, a little bit of the work we've done so far, but actually the work going forward is for us all to do. And I keep looking at the chat and I can see some quite positive comments, which is good to hear.
Very much so. Thank you, Kathy and Susie, so very much. Lots of people, I think, been very excited about this project, including myself. We are a little short on time. Just so if quickly, if possible, just one question for the both of you. What is the time frame for the rollout? And also, how will the issues of equipment, staffing and human factor issues be addressed?
Oh, they're two very big questions, aren't they? Time frame, I mean, everything is really kicking off around July, is my understanding, and we have tight time frames, but I think we're hoping that the first bit of work going on to some feasibility testing in those pathfinder units will all take place in about a year. So we're probably looking at getting through to sort of about the middle of next year. But we're not quite sure what happens from there on, because that very much depends on more funding, if there can be some funding from the Department of Health. But we know we've got to move quickly. We know that everybody wants an answer quickly. You know, Susie and I have been doing this since 2019 and knowing that everybody wants the answer. So I think, you know, time is of the essence, we might say, on that one. I forget what the second question was now, Susie. Do you remember?
No, sorry.
That's okay. I think I'm actually going to move us on because we're a bit short on time. But in the chat, there is a question in the chat around how things like equipment and staff.
Oh yeah, the equipment things, and I can have a quick answer to that. And all I can say is, if we can provide the evidence that equipment is a problem and staffing is short, then that's how we really badger the government to put lots of funding into these things. But we'll get the evidence for that. That's what we've got to do.
Thank you both very much for your time this evening. So moving us on, a very warm welcome next to Eileen Dudley, Patient Safety Manager, and Matt Neo, Lead for Oxford Academic Health Science Network, Wendy Randall, Consultant Midwife at Oxford University Hospitals, and Christine Harding, Consultant Midwife at the Royal Berkshire, who are going to present their work on intelligent intermittent auscultation. Thank you very much.
Is it possible to for the host to start my video? Because I don't think it's working.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And my apologies, I'm sharing, so bear with me and I'll just get it up and ready.
Eileen, you should be able to start your video now.
I'm trying. Ah, there we go. Thank you, Louise. Thank you.
Okay, Eileen.
I'm just waiting to see your slides.
Oh, are they not there?
not yet.
Try again. It counted down and then said I had it, and then it disappeared.
Okay.
I've got a line round it. Does nobody see it?
Not
I
yet,
certainly
no. Have you, if you completely unshare, Wendy, start again. Oh, I think it might be working now.
There we go.
Aha.
Well done. That's perfect. And we can see it in full screen as well, Wendy. So good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for inviting us. We're delighted to be invited to share our work on taking an intelligent approach to intermittent auscultation for low-risk women and babies in labour. My name is Eileen Dudley, and I'm the Patient Safety Manager and the Matneo SIP Lead for the Oxford AHSN.
And I'm Wendy Randall, and I'm the consultant midwife at Oxford.
And I'm Christine Harding. I'm the consultant midwife at the Royal Berks in Reading.
So the aim of this short session is to present how we have developed a new approach to optimise fetal monitoring for low-risk women and babies in labour through intelligent intermittent auscultation. Through using sounds to teach and assess competency, we have enabled practitioners to test their skills and ultimately improve their accuracy.
So neither Christine or I are fetal monitoring leads. We actually started this work before organisations had these roles, and we started it in response to, you know, our mutual recognition that there was significant variation in practice of IA, which contributed to poor outcomes in low risk settings. So apologies if you have seen this before, but this is the data that we used to inform our project. You can see that, you know, in Oxford we'd seen an increase in instances involving IA, and this was reflective of what the other organisations were reporting. So what we did was we constructed our training by taking CTG traces to Oxstar simulation technician. And what they did was they filmed the sound of, you know, what we've highlighted in that oval shape just now. And what we looked at was if you were using the sort of standard NICE approach, if you started counting, you're assuming this is straight after a contraction, but if you started counting immediately at the end of a contraction at 1 second and stopped at 60 seconds, you would get a baseline that's demonstrated here with this red line, because you would include that acceleration in your count. However, if you adopt the IIA approach and work out your baseline by listening for 60 seconds, you identify a much more appropriate baseline for what you can actually hear. And as you all know, although NICE doesn't teach you on how to assess a baseline when you're using IA, we all know that it's imperative for assessing fetal well-being. So we made all different types of sounds, which are part of our package. And this is another example, and you can see this one much clearly because there's a contraction demonstrated there. But this helped us to focus on the actually when you're listening and calculating your baseline rate. And, you know, warts and all, we found in Oxford that midwives were listening when a woman looked like she'd recovered from a contraction, or she could tell you that she had, or actually midwives who were saying, well, I go to the easiest reference point on my watch, you know, for example, at 3, 6, 9, or 12. And you can see from the CTG and the sound that we recorded that depending on when you start listening at various points and the time that passes while that woman's required, could get you a different rate. So if you started as per NICE at 1 second and finished at 60, well, the red line's meant to come up first, that would be the red line that you would get, because you would have been including your deceleration that's recovering back to baseline. But actually, if you actually work through you know, intelligent intermittent auscultation, you will get the right baseline, and you will pick up that there was a deceleration that was prolonged to recover. So, I mean, in summary, when Christine and I started our journey in our own organisations, we presented at the National Consultant Midwives Forum, at Saving Babies' Lives conferences, and, you know, to be fair, we were inundated with requests to share our local programme. So we ended up presenting at lots of different venues over the South and Midlands, and therefore, due to time pressures and other aspects of our role, we really wanted a different way of sharing that was less dependent on us. Because as much as we'd love to make a career out of it, we did go to all these units without being paid. So it's over to Christine.
Thanks, Wendy. So Wendy and I sought support from the Oxford AHSN to help us to transition to an e-learning platform so we could enable the training to be reached by a wider audience. And with collaborative working and engagement from the AHSN, we were able to secure funding from HDE to convert our training into e-learning. It took about 5 months of tight deadlines to deliver this, and we're really grateful for the support that we've had from the Oxford AHSN, Health Education England and e-learning for health, and we've been able to turn this around fairly quickly. And as far as we're aware, there's currently nothing else nationally that delivers an e-learning package and assessment for intelligent intermittent auscultation. So partnership working has been really important within the Oxford AHSN and Oxstar, and the funding from HDE, which has enabled us to develop this platform. And the content has been peer reviewed by the RCM education leads, and we gained professional accreditation in November of last year. In 2020, the programme won the Innovation of the Year award at the Health Service Journal Patient Safety Awards, and was highly commended in the education and training category as well. And in February of this year, with the successful collaboration with eIntegrity, it means that this programme is also available internationally, where it's got the potential to save lives by supporting the avoidance of unnecessary intervention.
So I'm going to take you back to the slide that I showed right at the beginning, with the number of days between instance, and you can see that since implementation of this education and training package, we've seen a marked improvement in outcomes. In Oxford, we were at 1,337 days between serious incidents when I last updated the slide, where IA was a contributing factor, which is a massive journey from where we were before, and another reason why we want to share our presentation widely. We've been asked if it has increased our transfer rates, and our response is always only for the right women, where a problem has been accurately identified. So these are the findings from our unit, and Oxford at the top and Royal Berkshire underneath. And the most important aspect of this programme is that improved midwifery knowledge and accuracy in IA means that low-risk women and babies are receiving high-quality, safe care to ensure the best possible outcome for their labour and birth. You can see from this slide that there have been improvements year on year, with it becoming increasingly safer for women to birth their babies at home or in midwifery-led units. And the number of babies born in poor condition are small, as one would expect from low-risk women, and this is hugely reassuring that the training and assessment is achieving its ambition for safer care.
For organisations who might be concerned about the number of midwives who are unsuccessful, our data from quarters 1 to 4 in the last financial year, incidentally coinciding with COVID, shows that 3,514 midwives undertook the training and assessment, and 89% of them were successful in 2 attempts, which is really fantastic, considering that this is a new concept for some midwives. Ideally, we recommend that midwives seek a one-to-one conversation with the fetal monitoring lead, or PDM, if they're unsuccessful. However, we know it's human nature to want to keep trying until you get it right. But organisations are able to access their data on the e-learning for health platform, and that enables them to identify midwives who are having multiple attempts, and they can therefore be approached quite proactively to discuss any difficulties they might be having. So from this data, we can see that the average time to complete and pass the assessment was 24 minutes, which is perfect. From the data as well, we can see that in the same period, almost 39% of midwives passed the pre-course assessment, which should reassure them that the technique they're currently using is accurate. However, it highlights that just over 60% of them weren't accurate, and were requiring some further training. After completing the training package, over 81% of midwives had an effective technique for carrying out intermittent auscultation, which is a marked improvement. So this enables organisations to be reassured that their midwives have an accurate skill and can identify those midwives who need additional support to help them develop their skills further.
So good practice and learning has been disseminated to over 6,000 users on the Health Education England eLearning for Health hub, and the user registration figures you can see there are increasing steadily, which demonstrates the interest in the programme. So we have set up a Train the Trainer IIA hub on the Futures NHS platform because it's secure and easily accessible for NHS staff, and it supports replication of the programme and has currently got 126 influential members of midwives in fetal monitoring roles in England and Wales. Here you will find links to the masterclasses which we recorded in January and October 2020, and a session we facilitated on the request of the Regional Chief Midwife for the Midlands in February 2021, as well as other assessments and answers document, and also we've compiled a couple of frequently asked question documents. There's a discussion group option, and all of these resources are for the purpose of supporting midwives in education or fetal monitoring roles to implement the training in their organisations. So we want to share with organisations the success we have achieved with increasing skills and midwifery accuracy and confidence.
So while the majority of feedback has been positive and reassuring, we want to focus on the things we can do better. So we do appreciate the feedback, and we are having conversations with eLearning for Health to make improvements where we can. And our plan is to refresh the assessment every year as well. We feel the positive feedback speaks for itself, and positive comments are by far in the majority. We appreciate the training package is challenging for some individuals, and it's important we support them and help them to see that this change in practice is a positive step, as we all want to do our best to provide safe and effective midwifery care. Some organisations worry that staff aren't passing, but if you stick to the programme and invest in staff support through your fetal monitoring roles, the woman and ultimately her baby, the midwife and organisation will benefit. So please don't lose faith or look for shortcuts to ensure staff pass. It's all about enhancing skills to ensure safe practice, because if the skill isn't accurate, then help them to develop it until it is.
As part of our annual update, we recently approached HSIB to make sure that our training reflects the recommendations that they're making, and reassuringly, the programme already includes this content. So we continue to work with organisations such as HSIB to ensure that the content is current and relevant to today's practice.
So I'm probably about to get cut off because overrun typically, but in summary, by creating local solutions and being able to share these and willing to share it, we proved that you can have a positive impact on national patient safety in a relatively short space of time. We're committed to ensuring that this dynamic programme continues to be responsive and reflective of current guideline practice, and helps midwives to provide high quality care now and into the future. We're really pleased. We seek every opportunity to share our journey, and especially about optimising fetal monitoring for women and babies in low risk labour. We hope that you found it interesting, and I'm not sure there are time for questions. I do apologise. Give me a mic and I can't stop talking.
Thank you so much, all three of you, and congratulations on your awards. Very, very well deserved. It's a truly valuable resource that I'm sure we will all very much be supporting in our units. Thank you so much. You are right, we have overrun, and I'm going to move us swiftly on. There are some questions in the chat, I think, if you're able to just take a quick look. But moving us on to our last speakers of the evening, I'm delighted to introduce to you Tipswala Day, obstetrician and midwife Kerry-Ann Llewellyn from Hywelda University Health Board Wales, taking us through their perspective of implementing a physiological interpretation approach. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, Natalie. So I'm just going to share the screen. Are you able to see the screen?
We briefly did and then it disappeared. I think you might need to unshare and share again.
Okay, sorry, bear with me. The screen is actually just frozen, sorry.
No problem.
Sorry, it's completely frozen. I can't see that. Okay, you should be able to see it now. Is that okay for everybody?
No, it hasn't come up yet.
Sorry, I will try once more. Are you able to see the screen now?
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Sorry about that, everybody. So thank you very much, Natalie. And I'd like to say thank you on behalf of myself and TIPS for inviting us to present. It's a real honour to be presenting alongside such wonderful, inspirational speakers. So thank you very much. So for those of you who perhaps don't know anything about our health board, we work for Hywel Dda Health Board. And we are a rural health board that covers 3 counties in West Wales, which includes Carmarthenshire, Pembrokeshire and Ceredigion. And actually, although we are small in terms of numbers, actually we cover over a third of the total landmass of Wales. And we provide intrapartum care across 3 sites. We have 2 obstetric delivery suites, we have 2 alongside midwifery-led care units, and we have 1 freestanding midwifery-led unit. We also have level 2 neonatal facilities in our main site, and we are able to accept neonatal admissions from 32 weeks gestation. Our average births are approximately 3,200 per year. So why did we move to physiology-based fetal heart rate monitoring? As we've all discussed tonight, the reviews have shown that recurrent evidence of poor outcomes due to misinterpretation and also failure to act on CTG abnormalities, identifying the needs for improvements in training and practice. And this has consistently been found in the Each Baby Counts reports and also with the Embrace Saving Babies' Lives. So like we've all discussed, there's a long way for us to go, and it's something that as a group we felt really passionate about and something that we were really keen to move forward. So this is how we started. So in 2017, we introduced our physiology-based fetal heart rate monitoring. Moving on from that, then we embedded physiology-based training into our midwifery mandatory training and also for the obstetricians. And that includes 2 hours of CTG training and also intelligent intermittent auscultation with a real emphasis on the underpinning physiology. When we look at the clinical care that we provide, we implemented physiology-based CTG stickers across all of our sites. And as pictured here, you can see these are additional stickers that we have piloted on our main site in the labour ward. So the first one is the checklist to exclude chronic hypoxia. So at the time when women are transferred to labour ward, all midwives who are caring for those women are expected to complete these stickers to enable them to exclude any pre-existing hypoxia. Again, our stickers support the use of fresh eyes, and this is something that we audit and we regularly reinforce via our risk and governance newsletter, via our safety briefing. We also have a band 7 or a labour ward coordinator and an obstetrician's CTG reviews, which again are based around that physiology. So all of those things we have implemented to support our staff, but the one thing that we encourage the staff really to think about is that baby's labour journey, and actually, is that baby okay? And really that reminder that CTG stickers aren't there to replace their clinical knowledge and insight, but they're very much there as an adjunct to assist them in consistently assessing the fetal well-being. So this is who we are. We are the CTG group, and we collectively have got a very diverse set of skills. All of us have full-time clinical jobs alongside our passion for fetal heart rate monitoring. So we have got the leader who is the obstetric and labour ward lead, and also myself as the clinical risk and governance lead midwife. We also are made up of 2 consultant obstetricians, an obstetric specialty trainee, a labour ward manager and 2 labour ward coordinators. And actually what we are is a group of enthusiasts and visionaries, but we have got a huge pragmatist approach in us as well, where we really use that knowledge and skills to underpin what we are delivering. And what we are aiming to do is inspire those conservative and those skeptics among us to actually engage with physiology-based CTG monitoring. What's really important for us is when we look at leadership is that our leadership is compassionate and inclusive. So we're inspired by the work from the King's Fund, very much about listening with fascination to support staff and any concerns that they may have raised. So how have we actually done that? So prior to COVID, we delivered weekly CTG reflections held on the ward. There was minimal attendance really from a midwifery perspective, and some attendance from the obstetricians. So we looked at a variety of learning opportunities and actually how we could use Microsoft Teams to our advantage based on our geographical challenges that we were facing. And that was seen to be a barrier to staff attendance. So we hold our CTG masterclass annually, and this has been now moved to online to encourage engagement. We hold regular reflection meetings, and these are MDT meetings with regular presentations by junior doctors, Band 5, Band 6, Band 7 and Band 8 midwives. And the purpose of having that variety is really to encourage more junior staff to feel comfortable talking about CTGs, and very much about those human factors and reflecting upon that to really enable us to drive our service forward. Fetal heart rate monitoring is embedded into our 12-day midwifery preceptorship programme, and as part of that, our preceptees are expected to deliver a CTG reflection along with the support of our wonderful clinical supervisors and our practice development midwives. Aside from that, we've also got a YouTube video resource to refresh the underpinning theory. We have a quarterly CTG newsletter with links to CPD articles, and we've got links to the Orwell's and fetal monitoring networks for updates and collaboration to ensure that we've got the latest evidence base. So what challenges have we faced? So actually it was about how we can encourage staff engagement, how we can really inspire staff to want to attend. And this is where our leadership has really come into its own, because we've had wonderful engagement from our midwives and our obstetricians. We have approximately 45 to 50 midwives. So we have a quarter of our total midwives attend each and every reflection, and it's not the same ones at every reflection. It was very much about detraumatizing staff who've associated reflections historically with a punitive exercise, and actually about reinforcing that no blame culture, that it's a safe space to reflect and have those really important professionals discussions. We also had to identify key areas for learning and offer support to staff who were struggling, and how we can continue with that, and how could we go around balancing it all. So we really asked and evaluated how we could improve that for staff. So all of our cases are anonymised, both to protect the identity of the women themselves, but also to provide some anonymity to the staff who were involved in providing care. So there's never any identifiable features on any of our reflections. Some of the midwives in particular felt that they found it difficult to engage on the large Teams events. So what we tried to do is we did live anonymised polling. So this allowed staff to participate anonymously without any fear of judgment, and that sort of reinforced that belief, and we've really been able to encourage staff to engage that way. A really important feature was about sharing our passion with everybody as well. So it's advertising, advertising and more advertising. So we've got posters, we've got social media platforms, we've got emails, we've got newsletters. We've really tried to encourage as many staff as possible to attend. But also it was about administering CPD certificates automatically on completion of feedback to really promote that engagement. So we wanted to base our feedback around you said, we did. So we wanted staff to feel that their feedback was important and it was valuable for us. So we produced a monthly feedback infographic to really inspire staff, so that when they provide feedback, that their feedback is actually meaningful and it makes a difference. So we've seen lots of positive response in response to the staff's feedback. So initially, lots of the comments were relating to a fear around engaging and not feeling empowered to speak. And that really is something that we've worked to develop, and we very rarely have that as feedback now. The other thing that we did was really about understanding that assessment drives learning quite frequently. So what we've implemented is a mandatory quiz on the feedback form to consolidate the key learning points and identified areas which would need further training, and really how we can then embed that further training. So we link in closely with our clinical supervisors for midwives and our practice development midwives. And for those staff who are requiring additional support, they can be identified from the quiz responses, and we can actually put programmes in to support them. Because as we know, there are multiple reasons why people don't do well on quizzes. It's not always just a lack of understanding. Sometimes it's fear around the quiz itself. So we work closely with our teams to support our staff. So the CTG team works really closely with the clinical governance team to enable dissemination of key learning from case reviews, with the emphasis on reflection and not criticism. So as the risk and governance lead, we complete obviously the thorough datexes and also the findings from root cause analysis. And actually we use those to underpin our weekly reflections once we start to note themes and trends, and we present these quarterly at our quality and safety meetings as a directorate. So, as I said, we all have full-time clinical jobs, so it is very much about supporting each other, sharing the workload, and really managing on plenty of caffeine to keep us going. So we meet regularly, but we also have a WhatsApp group where we can sort of discuss and reflect on the reflections themselves, and also people on this group share latest evidence as well. So what have we achieved since the implementation of the physiology interpretation? So the first and the most important thing for us initially was about increasing staff engagement, because we know that if we want to really see a difference for the women and for their babies, we first have to have the buy-in from staff. And like I said, that's really where that compassionate leadership came from. So you can see in late 2016, when we implemented our physiology-based interpretation, there was a reduction in the number of babies born with an APGAR of less than 7. And it went from 1.8 to 0.8, so over a 50% reduction. We also saw a drop in the number of caesarean sections performed for presumed fetal distress. So it went from 21% to 17%. So that was a significant and a statistical drop as a result of the physiology-based monitoring. And we're proud to say that we've had no cases of HIE 2 or 3 secondary to intrapartum events since the implementation of the physiology-based interpretation of CTGs. We also have regular discussions at handover in relation to emergency caesarean sections, and the rationale is discussed. And this is audited, and the findings are disseminated at Labour Ward Forum for wider learning for all staff. So where are we heading? So moving forward, we'd like to see the implementation of a summative assessment, a mandatory assessment for all clinicians involved to really support that learning. We've done lots to break down barriers and around the fear associated with this type of learning. So we now feel that the staff are in a position where they've developed a resilience enough to be able to manage a summative assessment. We plan to continue our evaluations and recognise that it's a continually evolving and a very, very fluid model, and that we don't want our sessions to be static. We want them to be interesting, we want them to be engaging. At the start of every session, we emphasise the positive culture and the no blame learning environment that we promote. We've recently engaged with the GreatX, where we're starting to really identify and reward staff when they've provided care outside of what's usually expected of them. And we want to praise and reward staff for doing incredibly well. And also, like tonight, it's about the wider engagement and learning from centres of excellence. It's not about working in silos, it's about collaborative working and sharing from all the amazing work that's happening elsewhere. So thank you, Diolch. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kerry-Ann. You managed to get through that very promptly. We have slightly run over our time just by a few minutes, but I did just see a question pop up that I was going to ask, but they've just people are posting and it's gone down. Lots of people saying great idea around the anonymised audience participation. What a great idea to help that engagement when you've got staff who are fearful. I thought I saw a question. Did the PDM team get any additional training to be able to support the support programs?
So we're very much collaborative working, and it is something that we all engage in, together. So our PDMs are very much invited to be part of, what happens in our CTG group. So it started as an informal group, and it's really evolved over time. So again, it's about that sort of sharing of learning, about engaging with that recent research, all of that data that we can, and it's about sharing everything that we've got together and really celebrating those CTG champions to be able to then disseminate that wider.
Yeah, huge team effort and approach. It's really great to hear. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you to everybody who has spoken and presented their amazing work this evening. We're so grateful for your time and all your hard work and commitment. Very quick reminder of our next 2 webinars. The next one is on the 23rd of June, Partnerships with Women, Birthing People and Families, and then the 28th of June, MDT Working and Training. I hope everybody enjoys the remainder of their evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope you've all had a great session, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.